right, for more, let's bring in Incubate Debate founder and Azoria CEO, James Fishback. James, always good to see you, especially on topics like this, because this is something you think very deeply about. And it's a thorny one, because you've got speech in the world that you just hate. It's awful. You wouldn't want to hear it come out of anyone's mouth. But of course, the First Amendment exists to allow people to say things that you find despicable. In fact, Charlie Kirk himself was someone who spoke a lot about whether we should be talking about things like hate speech. So how do you sort this out? How do you react to the Attorney General's comments?
Well, good evening, Brian. I think my friend Charlie put it best, that the answer to speech that you dislike is speech of your own. It's telling the truth. That's what my friend did last week when he was on a college campus and an assassin's bullet killed him for debating the ideas in the public square. I respect Attorney General Bondi, but hate speech is a made-up concept by the left. And if we cede ground to them, what they're going to do is in 8 years, they'll come and turn around and try to throw us in prison for saying that there are two genders, or God is real, or that the 2020 election wasn't perfect. Hate speech is a made-up concept, and it's speech that incites violence under the Supreme Court's definition in Bradenburg v. Ohio in 1969. That limited gauge of speech, of course, can be criminalized.
Well, of course, that was her walk back, though, was saying, hey, look, we're not going to investigate anyone for alleged hate speech. However, we will for speech that unlawfully incites violence. So she did kind of walk that back to go into what you just said. But then what about the consequences of speech, right? Of course, everyone is entitled to say what they want. But, you know, if you go out and you celebrate the death of someone, an employer might be like, you know what? That's not someone who I want to have on the team. That's not someone who I want representing my company.
That is exactly right, Lisa. And the First Amendment of the Constitution is clear. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. It does not say that private businesses can't hold employees accountable for conduct they find detestable. I mean, imagine if the government could tell Office Depot or Starbucks or Disney that you have to keep someone on the job even though they said something that is profoundly disgraceful. That in and of itself would be a constitutional violation because it would be compelling the employer to agree with speech that they don't agree with at the hands of the government. And so at the end of the day, private businesses will hold their employees accountable. That is a good thing, but the government needs to stay out of it. What I want AG Bondi to do is I wanted to investigate George Soros and Antifa for funding violence all over the country. That is clearly not protected. That's where their energy should be focused.
You know, some would argue that with Jimmy Kimmel's firing, that is indeed the government getting involved and telling someone you can't say things that the president administration doesn't like. I tend to view it, on the other hand, as you've got private organizations saying this guy is saying things that our customers don't want to pay for anymore. And if they don't want to pay for it, he doesn't have a right to say it on our airwaves. How do you read this issue?
Well, exactly right, Brian. Now, just imagine for a moment we were physically at Walt Disney World, and Goofy, one of the characters, goes up there and starts making all sorts of racial slurs in the middle of the Toontown show. Is Disney not allowed to remove that person and fire them? Of course they are. And so I think when we talk about the airwaves, it's somehow a different situation. But no, it isn't. It's the customers at home. It's the customers of Sinclair and Nexstar, these amplification networks for Disney and ABC affiliates. They were fed up. They were getting thousands of calls from customers who were saying, we don't want to watch this crap anymore. And it's about protecting the bottom line. Disney made a financial decision. It is not financially wise to keep Jimmy Kimmel on the air to spew this nonsense when customers, even Democrats, don't want to hear it.
We've got about a minute, but cancel culture seems really difficult to define. How would you define it?
Sorry, define what?
Culture?
Sorry, it cut out there.
How would you define cancel culture? We don't have a lot of time, but got about a minute, real quick.
Sure. So I would define cancel culture as this. The cancel culture that I and I think most Americans are against is very simple. Taking an opinion that is substantive and trying to punish someone for that. A substantive opinion saying something like, look, I believe the experimental COVID vaccine is not for me, or I believe that there are two genders. That is a substantive, debatable opinion where reasonable people can disagree. Now, it's not cancel culture when someone out there is trying to foment divisiveness, trying to justify the assassination of a husband and a father of two, and is celebrating it in a way that actually hurts the person that they work for in their business.
Boom.
That's accountability culture.
You honestly nailed it time-wise. So, James Fishback, thank you. We appreciate you joining us.
Good to see you. Appreciate
it. Great insight.
Yep. Lisa, always a pleasure to hang